I'm Susan Beebe, and I'm an artist and an activist, and I've been a lifelong both. This is the first thing I did relating to activism, and this is when I was 12. I was at an Audubon camp in the summer, and I found out about the campaign to ban DDT, and so I made this praying mantis, which is, I've always loved insects, and so this was to just to advocate for insects, and I've continued that my whole life. So this is my studio. I'm here at the Lincoln Street Center, and so now we're going to go out in the hall, and I'll just go through it in chronological order. I'd start in 1983. I was living in Seattle, and I was involved in a Puget Sound Women's Peace Camp. So we were protesting the making of cruise missiles, which were nuclear-armed cruise missiles by Boeing. So we started an encampment right outside of the Boeing plant at a sewage treatment plant, and we camped out for an entire summer. Then I moved to Maine, and I grew up in Connecticut, and my mother and I lived on an island for 16 years. So I didn't have an opportunity to do too much activism there because we lived off the grid, and I didn't have a car, and I still don't drive. Anyway, so then when I married Jonathan and moved to the mainland, the first thing I got involved with was the Route 1 widening in Warren and this Saving the Elephant Tree, which was a magnificent horse chestnut, and I painted it. All 88 trees were marked to be cut down for this widening by the Maine Department of Transportation. And there was a lot of protesting. Steve Burke organized a lot of protests. And when I painted the tree, I fell in love with it, as an artist does with their subject. And so I decided I had to try and save it, or try and stand up for it anyway. And so the morning I knew the guys were coming to cut it down, I climbed up here sat in a deer stand for 6 hours. And two other people were sitting in a platform. Two people had their arms chained around the tree, and others were in other trees, including the most enormous oak I've ever seen in my life, which we did not succeed in protecting. We failed. We got down when two detectives climbed up. I got down, and I felt like the tree said I'd done enough, and I just couldn't give up my life for it, but I could do as much as I could. So anyway, later we had a trial, and I was allowed to use this painting in court. And on the back, it has a sticker that says Exhibit B or something like that. So then after that, I made this to go where the elephant tree had stood, because I didn't want them to just erase it, and they tried to make it look like it had never been there. They ground down the stumps, you couldn't even see it. So I put this up, and I actually made this in this building. So that was back in 2002. I had to guess, I thought the tree was about 100 years old. And I found out the story, the reason that it was called the elephant tree, because there was a circus maybe in the 1920s that used to come where the flagship cinema is. And there was an elephant on a truck, and the tree was just a sapling then. And the elephant started eating it and pulled it over on its side. But it was straightened back up again, and from then on it was always known as the elephant tree. And so when I had moved to Maine, I thought it was a place that appreciated its history, appreciated its stories, but I learned that wasn't true, that money controls everything. And, that was the reason these trees did not have to be cut down. If you go by this road now, this house, the tree could still be there. The real reason they wanted to cut the trees down was because that way they could keep 2 lanes of traffic open while they worked on the road. That was the real reason, though they gave all these other lies. Okay, so then 2 years later, No, in between was our invasion of Iraq. So that was 2003, and that's why I made this. I did go to Washington. Again, Steve Burke organized a bus. He was a wonderful activist, fearless, cheerful, amazing. I took a smaller version of this sign to Washington with me because I couldn't take this on the bus. But of course, this is still applicable to many things that are going on. And then, so that's 2003, and then 2004, the DOT came back, and this time they were targeting Camden, and they had marked 170 trees to be cut down with red dots. And so we had protests. We had, luckily, all the artists, a lot of artists had participated in a show. So I forgot to say that with the Route 1 widening, we organized artist friends to paint scenes of Route 1. And then we had a show right here in Lincoln Street Center, and 300 people came to that show. And the outrage was so great, and I even asked my brother to have his English students in Taiwan write to Maine and said, we're never coming here because you're ruining the landscape of Maine. And so the outrage and the pressure was so great that actually we brought down the head of the DOT. He resigned. John Melrose resigned. He said, who are these people? And we called the show Remove Tree. And that was when I really discovered the power of art to shame and to call attention to. But this, the angel, I got attacked for that in the paper. Somebody wrote in and said, why are you putting up an angel for a tree? Well, you should be putting up an angel because children are being raped and murdered. And so Jonathan wrote rebuttal and said, well, those two are not mutually exclusive. And Susan works with children, and so that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so then the Camden trees. So then we still had our organization of artists together, Artists for Trees. So we gathered and we painted all along Route 1. And these are trees that would have been cut down. These were all marked with red dots. My mother was there too. She and I did a number of activist things together. So she made that elephant tree sign right there, let the elephant tree live. She was painting me while I was painting the trees. And the reason that I put it on these 3 canvases is to show that the whole thing could be fragmented, could be broken apart and just destroyed. But then somebody came along, and I never found out who did this. Somebody came along and put over the red dots, which you can't see, but they put big red hearts over all the red dots of these 170 trees that the DOT was planning to cut down, and they backed off because they didn't want the same kind of negative publicity that they had in Warren. They didn't want the same kind of outrage. So really they didn't cut down nearly as many trees as they had planned to.
So you considered that a success?
Absolutely considered it a success, yes. Let's see, now I get confused about which years are which. I think then Jonathan had a gallery, and we had 3 shows that were related to Amnesty International. We had Portraits of Conscience, which were political prisoners around the world. And again, it was a group show. We invited a lot of artists to participate. That was here in the Lincoln Street Center and also at University of Maine at Augusta. And then we had Portraits of Guantanamo. And I did 2. These are real people. This is Mohammed El Garani, age 15. I did 2 15-year-olds who were in prison at Guantanamo. Mohammed El Garani. And this is Abdul Salam Al-Sheri, age 15, and he reminds me, I thought he looked like my Uncle Dan as a young boy. Anyway, I just couldn't believe we were imprisoning 15-year-olds, and I don't know what happened to them. I don't know. Let's see, what next? Let's see, that was 2007, and then this was another Amnesty march organized by Steve Burke against torture. So that's that. Then more recent, more recent activism, this is the Women's March. This is 2017. That was in Augusta. I didn't go to the National March, but I went to the Augusta. So I put myself in there. That's me, and that's my niece. I put her in there. And then let's see. This is George Floyd. This is how long the guy knelt on his neck. 9 minutes, almost 9 minutes. There was a protest here in Rockland, which was really great.
So in all of these, if you don't mind me asking a question,
Not at all.
or in many of these paintings that you're doing,
Yeah.
I notice you have really high contrast
Yes.
images that incorporate words.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about the choice you make to include these words, like 9 minutes, don't destroy our habitat, save the elephant tree.
Yeah. Because I want, for one thing, the contrast is so that it will show up from a distance. And it also shows up, this is the color combination that shows up the best. That's why it's used by highway departments. It shows up in both black and white photographs and in color photographs at the best of all. And I just try to boil it down to the essence of whatever the issue is. And hope, I'm thinking of publicity. I hope that a picture will be taken and people will see it. Or just people driving by or people walking by. You're usually standing on the edge of a road when you do this. So you have the audience of people driving by. And if you drive by a protest, you can't take time to read long signs. You've got to be able to see it instantly and understand it. And so the horror of having somebody kneel on his neck for 9 minutes, that was just a visceral horror that I felt. That was for me the essence of it. It's like 9 minutes. 9 minutes of what? You gotta ask what it was about. This was the water protectors in Standing Rock, and we did a protest here in Rockland, a solidarity stand. That was 2015. My mother is from North Dakota. She died in 2022, but she was very moved by that, and so she made. I have her sign here that she made. The Missouri River, and we are one Mother Earth. So she was out there in her late 80s, standing out there with the sign.
You've mentioned your mother a few times now.
Barbara Beebe was also an artist and a very passionate person who cared about justice, fairness, and truth, and was always writing letters to our congresspeople and senators.
Was that an influential?
Absolutely. Yeah, and my dad was a history teacher, so the combination of the two was a good combination. This is when Roe versus Wade was overturned. And, that was my first thought. We were going to have women dying.
And they have.
And they have. Yeah. And then more recently, I've been involved in trying to save Firefly Field in Rockland, which I named. That was my name that I came up with. Nobody knew there were fireflies there until I pointed it out. This is about larger issues than one small field. This is about loss of habitat. It's about destruction of wetlands. It's about light pollution added to a very dark area, which is going to be what the fireflies will, that is going to be the most damaging thing, is when they turn the lights on, all those buildings that they've built there. The environment is always getting short shrift. I know we need housing, but that was not the right place to put it. And so then when there were also, there were many things that lived there, like the bobcat, people had seen the bobcat there were coyotes, there were woodcocks, all these shy animals have gone now. And so then when they actually came to bulldoze a road into this field, which probably had not been changed since the glacier, It had never been developed, and there was a reason for that, because it is a wetland. And so I thought the Rainbow Firefly Field is a perfect title. So when I was standing there painting, this lone monarch butterfly flew by, and I thought, there's how ironic, you know. This used to be its habitat. This was full of milkweed, goldenrod, asters, and now it's dry and bare, and you know, there's nothing for it. So that was, and I was called a NIMBYist because, and I don't even live near there. I live a mile away. Jonathan and I also are activists together. We went to endless planning board meetings speaking about this, and we did get a concession. We got them to do a new wetland survey, and it turned out that they had an old one that wasn't really it wasn't accurate, and they had to cut their plan back by one house. So we felt we got a small. And this is how they say they've carefully protected the wetlands by a plastic fence. That's really careful. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'm involved with this wonderful, and this is recently, there was a march for trans and queer youth. And of course, this would be great to take to Augusta on Saturday, because it's now, they're being attacked more than ever. I'm now in this wonderful group called the Audacity, and we did a die-in at the Camden conference because Trump's policies are resulting in people already dying. And 10 of us laid down on the sidewalk and had gravestones that showed different reasons why people are dying. So if you come in here, you'll see even more. So this goes back to 2008, when I did an art show at Jonathan's gallery called Birds of the Boreal Forest, and this is 500 ducks drowned in a tar sands tailings pond. So this is about the destruction of the boreal forest, specifically for mining for oil or tar that's under the surface, and ducks were flying north of 500 ducks were flying north, and they saw a place they thought they could land. It was an oil polluted pond, and they struggled, and a few of them were able to fly up again, but 500 of them drowned. So I decided I was going to do something to commemorate these ducks, that they wouldn't have died in vain. So I made these are paper mache sculptures, and they are supposed to look like the ducks are struggling and sinking in the tar.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And there's more. This was when LePage was governor, and he took Frances Perkins, who was the first woman in a cabinet, the cabinet of FDR. She was the Secretary of Labor, and she created a lot of the protections that we have now, workers' rights and workers' safety and Medicare. And anyway, LePage took her name, she's from Maine, LePage took her name off a conference room at the State House, and he also took down the labor mural. So I had actually never heard of her before, which is absolutely terrible because my father's a history teacher. How come and I should have learned about her in school. Anyway, I thought this is exactly how women's history gets erased. And so there was a wonderful big protest at the State House, and I thought, this is somebody Maine should be proud of and needs to boast about, just like we boast about Margaret Chase Smith. So anyway, I made this banner and took this to the State House. And I'm hoping maybe the Frances Perkins Museum would like to have it at some point. Then this is more about the elephant tree. So the first two people to be arrested were Susie Higgins and Tim Sullivan, and they were standing in front of other trees that were going to be cut down. So I just thought, how ironic, for doing something so wonderful is to care about a tree and to protect a tree and to stand up for a tree. You're now going to go to jail, and you're going to be punished for that. So I made these. We stood outside the courthouse with these.
Have you ever gone to jail as part of your
I went
art
to
of
jail
protest?
I went to jail for the elephant tree. Yeah, they took me to jail.
What was your experience of that?
My experience was that it was really boring. I was only there for 3 hours, but we were in this. There were 3 women, me and 2 others, in this little triangular white room. We had been fingerprinted, mugshotted, and I just thought, is this all we can create? You know, we can create this boredom, this ugliness, and what we destroy is beauty, life, nature. And so they had made us take our shoes off, as they do when you go to jail, I guess, so you don't hang yourself with the laces or something like that. Anyway, I looked down at my sock, and I saw a tiny piece of the tree's bark on my sock. And I thought, how am I going to save that? Because I know when I go back, the tree is going to be gone. So I reached down and picked the bark off and put it in my mouth and swallowed it and ate it. So it became part of me. The tree became part of me. And then this is another one. This is another one for the Iraq War. And I had forgotten that I even had this. So thank you for having me get out this stuff, because it was just rolled up in my studio.
Absolutely.
And
So if you were to describe your work, this is on canvas, is that right?
It is. This is on unprimed canvas. Some of it's on primed canvas.
Would you call yourself a muralist, or how would you describe that in a word or a few words, this approach that you take?
This approach is shock, is to shock people, to just make them stop and think what's actually going to happen. I mean, I'm using symbolism. Obviously, the skeleton is a symbol of death, and the baby, you know, juxtaposing the two is a shocking image. I want people to think about the reality of the policies that are, you know, that we're attacking attacking a country, and it's full of real people and vulnerable human beings. That's what I'm trying to do it in a very graphic way, you know, using, as you said, words, symbols, emotions, strong contrasts, symbolic colors. You know, the red is blood, and of course it's red, white, and blue.
And while this skeleton is looking down at the baby, the baby's looking
at you. Yeah, the baby's looking at you. The baby's asking for help from you.
And what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And high contrast throughout. You can't mistake what's going on here.
Right.
There's no misinterpretation of your meaning that is going to happen.
I try to make it simple, strong and simple. This is what I did after 9/11, September 11th, when the Twin Towers were attacked and destroyed. And I was so moved. What I was so moved by was seeing in the paper that other people in other countries were weeping and holding vigils, and I just was so moved that people all over the world cared about us. And so that's why I had the world weeps. You see, each eye is half of the world. And there's a broken heart in the center.
You have a whole lifetime of work here of messages calling out to people, asking them to do something. And here we are. And it's in many ways worse than it has been.
Yeah. I don't know. It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. It's hard to decide what's the most important thing to make a sign out of. And also, this takes incredible emotional energy. You know, I didn't say that, but it's involving yourself in a cause, you know, and I haven't involved myself in every single cause that came along. But it takes huge amounts of time and energy and emotions and strength. And sometimes I get burned out and I have to step back for a while. I mean, I didn't do anything during the first Trump administration. I didn't do anything at all. But now I've got the Audacity, which is, it's a creative resistance, and that really spoke to me when I found out that it was going to be creative, it was going to be based around the arts.
How does that make a difference for you compared to, say, the first Trump administration?
It makes a huge difference. It makes me feel like I can do something, that I'm valued, that what I can supply is valuable. The first one, what was it called? I can't even remember what the other one was called. Indivisible. It seemed like it was more about legislation and very dry kind of things. And so it didn't appeal to me as much. But, and also I was dealing with the fact that my mother was dying over 5 years. You know, that was the other reason. And then COVID. But anyway, I feel ready to go again and ready to plunge in. And I'm making that Trump puppet. You saw that out in the hall. I am making this Trump puppet, which has a crown that's going to be able to be yanked off. And this is going to be worn by somebody. So,
that is a very ugly mug.
It is a very ugly mug. And I you know, a lot of these things that I've done don't have humor in them, but I want to use humor and ridicule and mockery to like take him down a peg, and many pegs maybe. Paper mache, and that's it's just over cardboard that Jonathan, my husband, gets for the frame shop. So this is corrugated cardboard that I just bent in a circle. And I actually started out with a few caricatures of Trump from different angles. And that I looked at pictures online. So anyway, I take rolls of this thin foam packaging and I roll them up and tape them in place. And then I make a glue with cornstarch and water by boiling it together. And then I dip pieces of brown paper in. And that will stick, that basically sticks to itself. So you have to make a couple overlapping layers. And then I realized that he like, as my dad said, he juts his chin out like Mussolini. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't sticking out enough. So I just sliced it with an X-Acto knife right here, and I swung this whole part forward, and then I put some padding in under here, and I made it more jutting out.
So Susan, I've heard some people say that mockery and bitter humor and things like that are in some senses violent or corrosive or not productive. But what defense would you make of bitter humor?
Oh, it makes me laugh. I think humor is great. I think it can puncture the pomposity of somebody like Trump. And I think it was Jacob at Hello Hello said it makes others realize that those people aren't so, you know, they can be made fun of. They aren't so all-powerful as they pretend to be. So I think I love the long tradition of political humor and political satire and sarcasm, and I was an avid reader of Mad Magazine. I learned from them much about satire and sarcasm, and I just think it's wonderful. There's a catharsis with, you know, you have this humor and it just like blows off steam. It's real. I think it's really great. You know, he's earned this face. This is like the picture of Dorian Gray. You know, he started out as a good-looking guy, but because he's been so ugly inside, it has come out in his face. Mm-hmm. You know, so he has earned the face that he has now. It's going to be taller. So I've got to make some kind of framework that goes over the shoulders, mm-hmm. and then a way to see. You know, like probably the face, person's head will be down here. Mm. And I'm going to make more of a structure so it can go over somebody's shoulders.
You've been thinking this through.
Oh yeah,
I'm
see thinking it
the
through
steps.
all the time, and
mm-hmm.
thinking it through all the time, and I just make it up as I go along. You know, so anyway, that's fun, and it helps. It also helps me.
How so?
It helps me laugh. You know, when I might feel like crying or just being in a rage all the time. It makes me feel more powerful and makes me want to be more involved, to actually do something. The more you do, the more you want to do, or the more I want to do.
Do you mind if I ask a few more questions?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
So, one of the things I've noticed about this work is that it has often been solitary. Not always. Sometimes working with others, but sometimes you have been a lone voice or a voice with just one other person.
Yeah.
But right now in this country, there are many people who are rising up.
It's so great.
What is your
Great.
favorite mode of activism? Do you like to work in groups, or do you like to work by yourself? What does that look like?
Well, I've really always created stuff by myself, but these will be part of, I imagine this and all of these have been part of a march or a stand, standing by the road, or a protest. Sometimes I've been the only one standing there, like especially when I was painting the trees or painting the firefly field. But with the signs, it's usually been part of a march or part of a mass movement. It's just my contribution. And I hope there will be many contributions.
If this all works, and use your own definition of works, what does it look like? What does a good future look like that comes from you taking the craft that you've developed to develop these paintings, these mobile murals, puppets? What happens that makes things go right from this art?
That's hard to answer, but I do work with kids in a program called Leaps of Imagination, and we are trying to empower them to feel that their voices count and their ideas count and their ideas matter, and empower them to speak up when they see something wrong, or when they to stand up for nature, especially. So I just hope that it will carry on into the future, and there are always new people coming along who care, and you just have to nurture them. Of course, I want the whole Trump administration to go away, totally go away, and to get back sanity. But I don't know, that's such a huge issue. I wouldn't know how to say what a good outcome could be.
There's the hugeness of what's happening.
Yeah.
And the power that's being wielded to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's you with materials.
Yeah,
or with small groups of people, with children.
Knowing that there are other people too, like that the protests are growing. Sometimes a few people standing out there, you started out with your singing group. It wasn't that big at the beginning, and now more and more people are coming every week. People want to do something. At first people were in shock, I think. I was, and kind of in despair. But now we're picking ourselves up and standing up more, and I think we're going to make a difference.